Um, so good morning, everybody. My name is Haruna Hosokawa from WPS Technology Department. I am here with my colleague, Casey, and this is going to be the webinar on Google Forms, specifically for using it as surveys. And I think you can all see my screen.
Yes.
And we are recording this webinar, and like I said, you'll be getting the recording in an email later on. Zoom takes maybe an hour or two to render these videos, and once they're done, we'll send it to you. We are asking you to fill out a feedback form, which will be towards the end of the webinar. And that will that has a couple of questions that you need to answer in order to receive credit for this webinar. So make sure you do that towards the end. And if you somehow need to step out early, we will send it to you in an email as long as you attend most of the webinar. And it seems like most people's names are displayed, so that sounds good. It is a fairly large group, so I'm actually going to mute all of you and ask that you enter your questions in chat. I think every once in a while I'll pause to ask more questions anyway, but if you have any questions, if you can enter them into the chat, Casey will be monitoring those chat and she will know to stop me if I have to stop and address something. And if you can't find your chat window, if you move your cursor towards the bottom of your window, you should be able to see a little chat bubble show up. Click on that and your chat window will open. Okay. And so for today's webinar, we're going to start out taking a sample survey just so that you get a taste of what a Google Forms survey might look like. And then I'm going to take you through what it looks like to view the data in Google Sheets once you get the survey data. And then we're going to take some time walking you through the steps of creating your own survey. And we will take each other's surveys and then you can take a look at the data on your end as well. So that's what we'll be doing. So it'll be kind of a mixture of hands-on as well as kind of walking through the steps. But before we get started with that, I want you to rearrange your desktop. So we're gonna be doing kind of switching back and forth between the Zoom window where I'll be sharing my screen and you going into your own Google Chrome account to create your own form. So I'm gonna ask all of you to first, if my screen has taken over your screen, I want you to press the escape button to get out of the full screen mode in Zoom so that your Zoom window can be resized. And then sort of resize it so that it's not covering the entire screen. And then also open up a Google Chrome window, which I'm gonna assume you have open since that's how you got into the Zoom session anyway. And then have that sort of in the background so you can click back and forth between the Zoom window and the Chrome window. So take a couple of minutes to do that. And then I sort of like to have them overlapping, but not either one of them taking over the whole screen. So it's easier to click back and forth between the two windows. So rearrange your screen so it kind of looks like this. And I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. And if it looks like you're all set, if you can type in your chat. I see someone's on a phone. So yes, on a phone, it's gonna be a little bit harder for you to follow this arranging your screen just because the phone screen is not very big. So if you're on your phone, I'm gonna suggest that you follow along the webinar for now. Don't worry too much about the hands-on portion, but you will get the recording later and view it again on the computer and do the hands-on portion that way. All right, it looks like people are getting set up. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do now is to take the sample survey. Now the purpose of the survey is so that you get a taste of what kind of questions there could be in a form and like go through the different forms of questions that could happen in a survey. So you do not have to answer this truthfully. It's gonna ask for like your name and age. I don't care if you make them up. So Casey will put the link to the survey in the chat. And once you're in there, it's gonna look like this. And again, you do not have to answer this truthfully. So And the main thing is for me to get some data in the survey so we can look at what the data portion looks like as well. So don't worry about answering it truthfully, just fill it out and submit. So I'm gonna do it as well. I am not gonna enter my real age. And as you're taking the survey, if you see some features in here that you are very curious about, like if you're looking at this and say, oh, I wonder how to put an image in a question, type that into the chat and we'll make sure we address that later on. So we'll give you a couple of minutes to complete this form. And again, don't think too much about the answer, but just get it in. And same thing with your school, you don't have to pick your actual school.
Bruna, for a moment, I thought you were going to say you weren't an early riser, and I was going to say, that is not true.
Sorry, quick question. This
Yes.
does not bring me to the form. I don't, unless I'm opened in the wrong window. Should I be opened in like Google Docs?
The link that Casey put in?
Yeah.
It's
when
not
I
taking
put
to the
that
form?
in Google, it brings me to what Google Docs.
Whoops, I just clicked
unless
it 3
I'm
times.
missing something.
It seems to be taking me to the survey. That's weird. You may have to cut and paste the link. Huh, so it's working for some people and not for some others?
Yeah, let me, yeah, it's, when I put it, okay, do I need to be in Google? Like, can I just do it from my browser? Because it's just not, it's not
Yeah,
working.
you can do it from your browser.
Yeah, it's not working. It's
right, let me try the short
weird.
link and see if that works.
I'll try it here.
Please try this shorter link and see if that works better.
Okay.
Any luck?
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, to be honest with you. Like when I put this, I do a copy paste.
Yeah.
And when I put that in, it just brings, I'll try it one more time. I'm gonna try it one more time. Sorry.
No, no problem.
I have no idea what.
All right. So don't worry too much for the time being. Not really sure why it's not. Are you in Google Chrome? That might be another issue. Okay, I'm seeing responses rolling in, so that's good.
I'm all set, thank you.
Okay.
Now I just have to fill it out though.
Yeah, just take a minute or two. It's not a very long survey, so. So I already have 18 responses, which is great. And I think I'll wait for a couple more to come in so we can look at the data side of it. And again, if there was anything about the survey that you're wondering how it was done, or you didn't know Google Forms could do that or anything like that, just put it into the chat and we'll make sure we get to it when we go through the hands-on portion. Okay, so 1 minute. So this is the form that you took. And to get to the actual back end where the data is, you're not going to have this button, but because I'm the owner of this form, I have this button to edit this form. Once you create your own form, you're going to get this button as well. But so I will, once I click that button, I'm taken to the editing version of the form, which looks a little bit different, but it has the same questions. And from here, you can get to the responses. So I'll click on the responses tab. And there are a couple different ways you can see, actually there are more than a couple ways, but you can see survey responses. And you can look at your responses right from the Google Forms itself, which I'm seeing right now, which it's great, but actually when you're taking surveys in and getting like 100 responses back, this may not be the best way. So what I'm gonna show you now is how to actually then look at this result in a spreadsheet. So from the responses tab, this little green button here, that's the magic button to get these things imported into Google Sheets. So I'm gonna go ahead and click on that, and it will ask you whether you want to create a new spreadsheet or you want to select an existing spreadsheet. Usually you want to create a new sheet. If you do existing spreadsheet, you'll have to select, it's gonna link to your Google Drive. You need to select the spreadsheet and it'll insert these results as a new tab in an existing spreadsheet file. But typically you want to create a new spreadsheet, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And once you do that, the next time you click on this button, it will take you to that sheet. So this is opening in Sheets. So these are all the results that came in. And this will update real time as new results come in. So if people are, if the sheet is still actively being used, this sheet will get updated in real time. So it's still loading stuff. So let's, okay, there it goes. All right. So we have 20 something responses. And when you first open it up, everything is sort of in the default column width. So it may not be the easiest way for you to see things. So you can sort of rearrange the sheet to make it look easier for you. And a lot of times these questions are long and you can't see the entire question. So typically what I like to do is just highlight this entire row where the questions are and change it so that the text can wrap and you can actually see the entire question. So that was up here, text wrapping, and that way you can see all of the questions. And so we have your name, which was a short answer. It just comes in as text. Age came in as numbers. And then this was a multiple choice question. So we see a lot of happies and okays. And this was a multiple selection type of answer. So some people, and it was an optional question as well. So there are some blanks. Some people have multiple selections, some other ones with one selection. I believe this was a scale from 1 to 5 type of question, and you would get the numbers. This particular one was a open response question, and again with this one too, you may want to wrap the responses so we see the whole thing, because if people typed in something kind of long, we will not see everything. All right, so everybody answered ready for questions. Actually, one person answered no. So this question was set up so that if you answered no, you didn't get the rest of the sheet. It just ended the form. So this person did not answer the rest of the form because the form ended when they answered no. So that's another thing you could do in Google Forms is depending on the answer to a multiple choice question, you can send people to different places. So you have your school. So this was these next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions, all of these questions were from, sorry, I'm switching back and forth between screens. They were from, actually, wrong form. I just need to get to the next page. Sorry. This was, let me just quickly get to the other form. All right, so the 5 questions was this grid. And so depending on what you picked for each of these rows, it shows up on here. So you kind of get the same grid that you had. The next question was a file upload, which is an interesting feature in Google Forms. You can have users upload a file and it will show up in your spreadsheet as a link to a Google Drive. So as soon as you create the question where users are required to upload a file, it creates a folder in your Google Drive. And it'll kind of prompt you when it does that. And all of these things will then live in that folder. And you just click on it and you can see the uploaded file. In this case, I believe this was submitted by me, and it's the BPS Technology logo. So that's also something you could do. And then we have the date, and that was it. So the nice thing about having all your answers in a spreadsheet is now you can use some of the filtering capabilities of the spreadsheet to then look at your data in a certain way. So the easiest way to create the filter in this is to, missing that button. So you might see it here. There's this little button that looks like a martini glass or a funnel. I think a funnel might be a better analogy. You might see it right up on here. If your window is kind of shrunk, then you may not see it. And then you can click on this little 3 dots to expand and get more buttons. But if you click on this create a filter, it will automatically set up a filter for all of your headers. Like it knows that this first row is a header and just set up the filter. And all of these 3 little lines, these things are filters. So you could filter based on any of these columns. So for example, I can be like, okay, so I want to know how many people think Zoom is awesome. So I'm going to say, so what you'll see here is these are all the responses that are here. And I can uncheck some of these and say, I only want to see the people who said 5. And I can say, okay, and now all my data is still there, but you just don't see them. And you can see, okay, so Casey, Kim, Mickey, Yujuan, Antonetta, and Mary Beth said that Zoom is awesome. Now you can see that this filter has been applied. If you look carefully, these 3 little line triangle thing turned into a funnel. So you can tell that this data has been filtered. Because sometimes you come back to the sheet and you're like, wait, where did all my data go? And you freak out. So that's a little sign that the filter has been applied. Now you can undo the filter by saying select all, which will select all of these values back again. And voila, you get your data back. You can also do something like, I want to know who. You can apply multiple filters. So you can say like, okay, I want to know who thinks Zoom is awesome and is also happy. So you can apply multiple filters and it will continue to filter the data so you can look at specific things. So for example, if you're using this to take attendance or do like a check-in with students, you can just filter by student email and say, okay, how is the student doing every day? So you can look at your data that way. Now, the important thing about these filters is you always want to undo it once you're done. because again, you do want to be able to see all of your data. What else did I want to show? I forgot. Oh, so you can also do something like, rather than just picking values, you can also filter by condition. So you can say, okay, I want to see what, I want to see everybody who is greater than 2, for example. Actually, everybody is greater than 2. So that's another way you can apply filters. So you don't necessarily have to just do the hand picking of the values. You can also do things like, where did it go? And again, all of these need to be undone if you want to see all of your data again. You can also do something like, if the survey is being used over different dates, you can be like, okay, I want to see between certain dates. Which in this case, it's a little bit hard to do because everybody just replied right now, so they're all the same dates, but you could do something like that as well. Okay, so that's a super quick look at spreadsheet. There are a little bit of warning about the filter is filter views will change the view for everybody. So if this is a spreadsheet that's being shared with your grade level team or your whole school and you apply a filter, then everybody else will see that view, which may not be something you want to do. So if you want to use filters, but only for yourself and you don't want everybody else to have to see that filter, there is something called filter view that you could use. So that's under data and filter view. Create a new filter view. Now, filter view is a private view just for you. And once you do that, it puts everything in this dark black border around everything. And filters will look exactly the same and operate exactly the same. The only difference with this is that only you will see that filter. Nobody else will see it. So if you just want to filter it so you only see your particular student, you can apply that. And you can save a filter view. So you can always come back to the same filter settings. So you can say like, okay, I just want to see my particular student. So let me unselect everybody who is not my student and filter that. And this filter view will get saved and you can pull it up again at some other time and it won't affect all the other viewers who are sharing the spreadsheet with you. So that's data filter view. All right, so I'm gonna move back into Google Forms and just walk you through creating forms. But before I do that, I just wanna look through the chat to make sure there aren't any pressing questions.
There were a couple of questions, Haruna, about the form itself, and I think you'll probably go through this, the idea of creating a form, and like you did just now with your example, you could either end the form at a particular point or move on, sort of creating that sort of split.
Yep.
Modeling that for people, I think they'd like
Right.
to see. And then there were questions about whether or not clearing a filter would clear the data. And I clarified that no, that would just be clearing the filter. You wouldn't be clearing the sheet of the data.
Correct.
I don't believe there's anything else that I missed about the survey itself. I think people were excited to see that you could add a file or a picture while responding to a form, as well as the idea of being able to choose so the difference between multiple answer and multiple choice. So being able to, have the check boxes versus the radio buttons.
Great. All right, so we will get through all of those when we get into forms. Awesome. So this is just a sheet about opening the survey results in Sheets. I just put this in there so that you'll have a visual to refer to when you are out of this webinar. So we are all going to work together to create a form. And there are several different ways to start a new form, but the two ways that I do want to highlight is you can go to any browser window and just type in forms.new into the search bar, into your just address bar up on top here. And that will open a new form. And you can actually, that's a shortcut you can use for any Google app. So you can do docs.new, slides.new, or you can just go to Google Drive and create a new form. So I'm actually going to do that. So this is my Google Drive. You click on the new button. Forms is not one of the ones that pop up at the beginning at the top, but you can go to more and click on forms. And that will start up a new form. All right. So we're set with step one. Step two, we are going to go to settings, which is the gear icon over here. And there are a couple of different settings. You don't necessarily have to do this at the beginning, but I tend to like to get this out of the way at the beginning so that I don't forget to do it later. There are a few important settings, and some of these settings are interrelated. So if you turn one thing on, the other one might turn on automatically. The first one is whether you want to collect email addresses. If you're using this with students, I would highly, highly suggest you have this turned on because even if you tell students to write their names, they don't always do it. And they may not always put in their full name. Unless, obviously, if you want it to be anonymous, you want to have it checked out. If you're doing a survey for parents or community members that are outside of BPS, I actually suggest you turn this off because not everybody has email addresses. So that's one of those things that you want to know who the survey is intended for, and check this up, check this or uncheck this. The response receipt is whether or not the person who filling out the form gets an email with the responses that they filled in. Sometimes you want it on, sometimes you could have the option to send it if they request it, or you can turn it off. That's, but if you do want to use response receipt, you obviously need email addresses as well because it gets sent to their email. Some places where I see this used is if it's like an application form or like something kind of important where you have to keep your responses, or if it's a student work and you want the student to be able to refer back to the work later on, you can turn that on as well. Requiring sign-in. This is, again, if the survey is intended for students, this is totally fine. If it is meant for outside person, it's very important this is unchecked, because if you have this checked and send this form to parents, they will not be able to access it. So that's another important setting that you want to make sure you have it checked or unchecked based on your audience. And limit to one response. If you have this checked, you will, they do need to be signed into Google. So that's another place where you kind of want to be careful with it, because that's how Google tracks whether or not you've responded. If you have it unchecked, then the person does not need to have a Google account. And then there's a couple other options here, whether or not you can edit after you submit, and see summaries. Now moving back up, I'm moving over to the presentation tab of the settings. Actually, I'm going to uncheck these things. The progress bar is, I think I had it set on the sample survey. I can find it again. Yes, there was a progress bar down here. That progress bar is if you have a multi-page survey that takes you to different sections, then it shows you the progress. You're on page 1 of 5, page 2 of 5, and so on. It does not make sense to have this unless you have a multi-page survey. So if your survey is only going to have one page, then you don't have that. You don't want to have that checked. You can shuffle question order, which will randomize the order of questions for everybody who takes it. That's, again, that's up to you. showing a link to submit another response. So after you submit a survey, you get the little box saying thank you for, or your response has been recorded. And in that little box, if you have this box checked, you will have a link to submit another one. It might be a nice thing if it's, for example, if it's a parent survey and the parent might have to submit this for multiple children. It's just a nice thing to have so they don't have to go fishing through the email to look for the link again. But if it's meant for something that you only do once, then it doesn't make sense to have that. Confirmation message is something you can customize, but the default setting is your response has been recorded. There is another tab here for quizzes. That's if you want to create a form that's self-scoring. I'm not going to go into this. If you are interested in making quizzes, we have another webinar called Forms for Assessments. So I suggest you either take a look at that recording or come to that session, which I think is scheduled for sometime next week. All right, so we are all set with settings. So I will go ahead and save that. All right, going back to this. So we did the first 2 checkboxes. The other setting options, which are mostly just visual things. So one of the things is you can create a theme. So you can change colors of the survey. You can also add an image at the top. And if you click on choose image, there's a bunch that comes up that you can select from. Or you can upload your own photo. Or you can go, it also links to your Google Photos drive to create your own theme. So you can make your form look nice and pretty. And you can also change colors from here. You can also select from 4 different font styles. Okay, so that's that. All right, so now we're ready to actually start making questions on it. Actually, no, we're not. We need to title the form first. So you can go ahead and type the title into the form. And this is the title that the students or the person who's taking the form will see. So it's the one that pops up on the top here. There is another title up here, which if you click on it, it will auto-populate with what you typed into the bottom here. But this is the file name that you see in Google Drive. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the same with this other title. So I can go ahead and change this too. And so this title up here is more for you. This is for the person taking the survey. You can add a description with instructions, which might be a nice thing to do, saying something like, no, please complete this form for blah, 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 blah. All right, so once you've done that, now you are ready to create questions. And it's preloaded with 1 question. You can go ahead and click in there and it will let you edit that question. And in the drop down here, you can select a bunch of different formats. Short answer, paragraph, multiple choice checkboxes, drop downs, file upload, and linear scale was like that on that scale from 1 to 5 type of thing. Multiple choice grid was the example you saw where you had 4 columns and 5 rows, and you click the different buttons. Checkbox grid is very similar to that. Multiple choice and checkboxes, they're actually very similar. The only difference is that checkboxes will allow you to select multiple things. So if you want the respondents to be able to select multiple items, you want to have checkboxes and not the multiple choice. Drop down is again similar too, but it presents the choices in a drop down menu. So if you have more than like 8 choices, a drop down might be a better way to just visually than multiple choice, because that will just multiple choice will make you have to scroll a bunch of stuff. So that's what you might see for something like selecting your school. There are 120 choices in here, and we don't want to see all of that in a multiple choice because it just takes up way too much room. So those are just some considerations you might have for answering for the type of questions. Now, Google will try to give you kind of suggestions. So if you put in here name, it actually detects that and puts in a short answer for you.
Haruna, may I jump in with a quick question?
Sure.
So this came up in the chat. The question is, can you set the choices as pictures for younger students? I believe that
Yes,
means,
you can.
Okay, great, thank you.
Great question. So you can insert pictures either as part of the question or part of the choices, or just have a question. So in our sample survey, which let's go back to this way, we had, this question had images for choices. Then we also just had a standalone image way at the end that looked like that. So you could put images in different places. To put it as part of the choices like I had for the happy faces, first of all, you need to have multiple choice or check boxes. And you're gonna hover over your choice, and there is a little icon here for add image. It pops up when you're hovering over a choice. You click on that and it gives you an option to insert image, either through an upload, or you can type in an address of an image, or you can just do a Google search right here. And you can stick an image in, and if it's a choice, if it's for multiple choices, then it puts in a thumbnail automatically, it resizes it automatically so it's not gigantic. And you actually do not have the option to resize this. If you want to insert a image as part of the question, you hover over the question and you click on this add image icon. And oh my goodness, so if it's part of the question, it puts in a bigger image, and this one you can actually resize and manipulate a little bit. Okay. This little box here is whether or not a question is required or not. And when you're taking a survey, you will see this little red asterisk by the questions that are required. So you want to pay attention to that as well. I also wanted to make sure I cover the going to different answer. So going to a different page. So to have different options based on an answer, there are a couple of prerequisites that you need to have. So one is you do need to have multiple sections for that to actually make sense. And then you also need to have a multiple choice question. So since I have a multiple choice question here, I'm just going to add a couple of other choices. And from here, there are these three little dots on the bottom right corner of a question. And there is an option to say, go to section based on answer. Click on that and it will populate these, it'll pop up with these new options next to each answer. So if somebody selects this answer, what do you want to happen? If somebody selects orange answer, where do you want that to go? Now, I only have one section currently, so I can't do anything interesting, but I can add a section. So rather than adding a question, you can add a section. This is a section in Google Forms is like a new page. So think of it as a page. And you can have additional questions in each page. I'm actually going to have 3 pages. So now that I have multiple sections, I can say, if you picked apple, I'm going to take you to page 2. If you picked oranges, I'm going to take you to page 3. And if you picked bananas, I am going to submit the form. So depending on what you select on this multiple choice question, it's going to take you to a different part of the survey, which might be like something we do often is like, are you a teacher versus are you a student? And that first question will then take you to a completely separate page of the survey. And then each one of these pages, now you have to also kind of set some things here. So once you're in page 2, if you finish page 2, where do you want to go? Do you want to submit the form, or do you want this person to still go on to page 3? So it gets a little bit tricky. And once you start doing this multi-page sending people to different places option, I strongly suggest you try out the form and try all the different variations of the form before you make it public and send it to someone else. I would even say have your colleagues try it out too, because it's really easy to get this navigation between the different forms kind of crisscrossing and mixed up. All right. The other thing I wanted to show is there are ways to put something called data validation on some of the questions. So for example, if I wanted to collect someone's email address, not automatically, but maybe like optionally, a parent could put in an email address. There is something called response validation. And that's again in the 3 little dots down below. You can say, I am going to make sure that this text that they're going to type in here is an email address. And if they just punch in their name in here, they will get a little warning saying this has to be an email address. You could also have something like I think that the age in the sample survey had this on it. It had a validation that it had to be a number. So if you try to type in age with words like, say, I am, spelling out the number, it won't take the answer. The reason why you might want to do it is when you're in your data in your spreadsheet, if everybody's putting in a number and all of a sudden somebody types in 10, T-E-N, you can't filter that. Like it's not going to work. The filtering doesn't work as well as if everybody had numbers put in. So having this data validation, response validation, kind of helps you limit the type of responses that can come in and maintain some form of consistency. The other place where this is really useful is if you have a paragraph response and you want to limit the number of characters so you don't get this ginormous essay come in. You can also do that with this and say, I want a character count. I don't want any more than 300 characters, for example. So you can do that as well. And as the person is responding, they will see that. So they'll know if they go too far. Or you can put it in the description saying, please keep this under 300 characters. So that is a response validation, and it only comes up for certain forms of answers. It doesn't always come up. So it depends on what the format is. I think for multiple choice, you may not have it.
Haruna, may I interrupt for just a moment?
Sure.
I see 2 things. Oh, okay. I think Ellen answered her own question. But I also see that we have a hand raised in the participant list, and I don't know if that's because Eugen wants to ask a question, but I'll pause and see.
Okay. So my question is, in order for you to direct the people to different place, you have to have multiple sections, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, that's my question. Thank you.
Yep, great question. Okay, so I want to make sure we have enough time to play a little bit. One important thing I do want to share before I send you off to create your form is how to share this form once you're done. So to share the form once you are done, There are different ways to do it, like with anything with Google, there are multiple ways to do anything. But well, first of all, to try your form after you're done, you want to click on the preview button. And that will take you to kind of the filling out version of the form. And you can see, this is where you can experiment to see if your navigation works properly, if all the questions look okay. Like here, I'm like, oh, I forgot to put in images for the orange and the banana. So you can see those things in the preview button. When you're actually ready to send it, the send button is the magic button for that. You can either send it by email, you can send it with a link. You can also embed it into a website, but most people don't do that, so I'm gonna skip that. So to actually send it to people, you can take this long link, or you can get a shorter link and just cut and paste that into anything, email, ClassDojo, you name it. If you are posting this in Google Classroom, you can also take this and put it into Google Classroom, and it'll show up as a form in Classroom. So in the remaining 10 minutes, I was hoping to have a little more time than that, but in the remaining 10 minutes, I do want you to try to make your own survey. And even if you only have a couple of questions, that's okay. And then share it with us in the chat. And that way we can answer them, or some of us can take the form, and then you can take a look at what the data looks like on your end and practice opening it up in spreadsheet. Okay. So don't worry if you don't get through all of this. I don't expect you to do that in 10 minutes. And, but if you did have a chance to start a form and add a couple of questions, ooh, there is one already. Awesome. We will kind of take turns taking each other's forms, so you'll get some answers in. And to share the form with us in chat, again, you want to go to that send button, click on the second email tab, and copy this link and paste it into the chat. All right, so I will leave this window up.
Can I ask you just a quick question?
Sure.
While people are working on that? So I'm looking at some of your other webinars, and one of them is called Using Video in Media. Now, is that like using video with your Google Classroom, or is that just using video in general? Because the description isn't super clear. And I don't even know if you know the answer to this.
There are a couple of different video ones. Do you know which one specifically you are referring to?
It just says using video. Media is a powerful tool to teach English language learners. We will learn some fun and exciting strategies to alternately accessing using camera and video for both students and teachers. I'm thinking that's using the camera from your laptop, but I could be wrong.
Haruna, I think that might be Nick's webinar
yes,
about using video with English language learners. Specifically, I think it's both. I think it's using the camera on the laptop as well as video clips in instruction, remote instruction.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
No problem.
All right, so I'm gonna leave that up, but I will take Rochelle's survey on my other window just to.
Haruna, there's also a question about whether or not participants can have questions in a Google form read to them so that they hear it as like an audio file versus reading it.
That's a good question.
I would imagine that might be a Chrome extension. I'm not sure. Yeah.
That would be my guess, but I'm actually not sure about that.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. I figured I'd ask before I go searching for a Chrome extension, but Regina, I don't know if you can hear me, but that would be my guess that this is most likely a Chrome extension piece that you could add to a form. I'll do a quick search while we're here. A Chrome extension is, there's the Google Chrome store online. You can download, essentially, they're little like extra pieces of software that you can append to an application. And so, for example, there are a variety of Chrome extensions you can add to different Chrome tools. So ones you can add to Google Meet, ones you can add to Forms, so on and so forth. So I'll search around and see if I can find one for that. I believe you can save links on a Chromebook.
You can do bookmarks.
Yeah.
But bookmarks tend to get out of hand. My kids like to bookmark everything, and they have a bookmark bar that is like
For
completely
some
filled.
reason, because my son has a Chromebook from BPS, it's
Mhm.
I don't know, and I'll come to the office hours, and maybe this is an office hours questions,
Mhm.
but the Chromebook I think is depending on if it's BPS administered, some things are locked. So I'm coming to the your office hours on Monday, and I'll bring this question up.
Great. We'll investigate before that. All right, so Rochelle and Lucy, I filled out your form, so you can go ahead and take a look at take a look if the responses came in, and also I also don't want to forget about the feedback form. So
I will post that momentarily.
okay. So I know you're still working, but we only have 6 minutes left, so I do want to start sharing some resources, and I believe Casey put the link to the Welcome to Google Forms one, right?
I did.
So that's this link down here, which
I'll post it again.
Yeah, and you'll get the slide deck as well when we send you the video. But this is Google's resource for getting started on Google Forms. Google's Teacher Center resources are actually pretty good. There are some online resources that we don't like, but Google's tend to be pretty good. So I will put it in there if you need some quick refreshers on how to do stuff in Google Forms. So that's all there. And then we do have additional webinars scheduled for the rest of this week as well as next week. And those webinars will continue past next week as well, although I do know that you all have a big deadline looming for next week. So, so on this website, if there's a big banner here for Go to Live Webinars page, and all of our schedules are posted, and next week's sessions just got added yesterday, so they are all there. So definitely take a look. And we do try to have office hours most of the days, probably not on Fridays, but I think we have all other days. And office hours are really for you to troubleshoot with us. So if you have, like if you go back and you're creating a form and you have some questions about forms, just drop in, and generally there are like 2 or 3 of us in there who can help with that. So, and if it's not, even if it's not forms, it's Google Classroom or Docs or whatever, just come on by. We're glad to help. And all right, so the feedback form has been posted. There are 4 reflection questions in there, but you only have to answer 2 of them. So just know that. It's not a super long form, and again, you only have to answer 2 reflections. And if you don't get to it right now, we will email you the form as well when you get the video recording and the slide deck. We'll also send you the link to the form, so that if you don't get to it right now, you can still fill it out later on. All right. So in the remaining 3 minutes, oh, I see there are more forms in here. There are tons of forms in here. All right, let's see how many forms I can complete in the remaining 3 minutes. All right, I'm seeing a lot of images in these forms. This is great. You can also embed videos in Google Forms. So you can have YouTube video embedded and then questions below that for students to answer, for example. And video does not get embedded in a question. You can't add a video to a question, but it just gets added as a separate box. And if you already know a video, you can just put the URL right into this box and it'll find it for you. Or if you don't know which video you want to use, you can search in here as well, and it gets put in like so. And then students can play the video right from this and then answer questions below that, for example. it's kind of a nice way to embed a video without actually taking students directly to YouTube. It does show like additional recommended videos at the end, but it doesn't start auto playing random videos like regular YouTube does. So it's kind of, it's one way to keep the kids from going down the rabbit hole of crazy YouTube videos. All right, so we have 1 minute left. Any last minute questions? All right, so so if you have any additional questions as you work through forms, don't forget we do have office hours, and you will be getting the recording, the slide deck, and the form probably this afternoon in an email. So thank you everybody for coming and joining us early in the morning. I'm gonna go ahead and stop my screen share and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks.
You
Bye.
too.